Okay, the next type of questions that we'll have involve squares and square roots and how we deal with those. So again, remembering that as we rearrange the equation, we're doing our BIMDAS, but we're doing it in reverse. So I'm going to deal with any addition and subtraction first, then multiplication and division, then indices. And indices, this is where really this worked example is coming into its own, because we're talking about squaring or square rooting. They fall under the indice categories. Then we've got our brackets. Okay, so let's look at problem 1. So you might recognise this formula as the area of a circle. I want to make R the subject, and in your textbook they'll put that letter that they want as the subject in brackets. So there's no addition and subtraction for me to worry about. That's great. I can move on to multiplication and division. I have pi times r squared. Right, so r is what I want all by itself. So first of all, I need to get rid of the pi. It's pi times r, so I'm going to divide by pi, and so far I've got a over pi equals r squared, because remember, pi divided by pi is 1. So now I am up to the indice part. I've got r squared here. I don't want r squared, I just want r. So I have to get rid of that square. This is where you need to know the opposite of squaring. We know opposite functions for addition, we know that's subtraction. Opposite function for multiplication is division. So the opposite function of squaring is to square root. Okay, so let me write that, square root. And vice versa, we can go back the other way too, from a square root back to a square. So I want to square root this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to square root this side and I'm going to square root this side. What this does over here, and I'm just going to change colours, this square root cancels out or undoes the square. So basically that is cancelling that out. Okay, so the square root undoes the square. So that leaves me with r all by itself, which is what I wanted. That's my subject of the equation, and then it is the square root of a divided by pi. Again, you don't have to leave it that way. If you would like to write it around the other way, r equals the square root of a on pi, you're most welcome to. Means the same thing. Students just like to have their subject often on the left. Okay, let's have a look at one now where we've got the reverse function. We've got the square root here. I want to get the L all by itself. When I look at this equation, I have, again, no addition or subtraction, so I don't have to worry about that. I move on to multiplication and division. I do have 2 times pi here, and then this really is multiplied by the square root of all of this. So I'm going to get rid of this 2 pi first. So I'm going to divide this side by 2 pi, and whatever you do to one side, you have to do the other. So at the moment I've got t over 2 pi, and remember 2 divided by 2 is 1, pi divided by pi is 1. So really we've just got on the right hand side now the square root of L over G. Now I want to get into the stuff that's under this square root, but I've got to get rid of the square root first. The opposite of a square root is to square. So I am going to square both sides. Okay, so that's a bit unusual. You probably won't have seen that too much before. Again, the squaring and the square rooting, they cancel each other out, which is awesome because it means now on my right hand side I've just got L divided by G. On the other side, let's have a think about this using our index laws. I've got t squared in the top. Don't forget that square squares everything in the bottom. So it squares the 2, 2 squared is 4, and it also squares pi, which we'll just write as pi squared. Now again, I want to get L all by itself. I am dividing by G. What's the opposite of dividing? Multiply. Well done. So I'm going to multiply by G. Whatever you do to one side, you do to the other. G divided by G is 1. So now I've got L equals. Now this G is in the top, so I'm just going to leave it in the top because it's really like G over 1. So that G will stay in the top. So it'll be t squared G all over 4 pi squared. So that's probably the most complicated type of question that you'll get. You can see that there's a lot of setting out that you need to do, and you do one step each time. So don't rush it. Remember to think of opposites, and remember to think of doing BIMDAS backwards. So get rid of any addition and subtraction first, then multiplication and division, then your indices, then any brackets. Good luck.